what has changed about the dawah and informing people about the correct understanding of Islam after 9/11?
Yes. Well, the dawah effort continued as it was in point of fact, and maybe it increased because we were frequently invited to take part in panels, to take part in meetings and conferences, interfaith meetings, you know, in order to explain what Islam stands for, and in order to explain the principles, you know, of Islam and to make everything clear to the audience. So perhaps our effort, you know, in the field of dawah, indeed, it did not decrease. On the contrary, it increased. You know, it was intensified.
But Imam, let me ask you about this one very important question: the issue of Islam and terrorism. What has been your way of explaining to the people and dealing with the question of Islam and terrorism?
Yes. Well, the question of you know, the dawah and explaining, you know, the principles and teachings of Islam was just, you know, explaining the virtual and factual, the factual things about Islam. I would, for example, explain the life of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. I would explain so many things from the Holy Quran, that the Holy Quran is the last version of the message of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that Islam very, you know, surely calls for peace, calls for security, and for mutual respect, mutual appreciation, and mutual understanding. This is the real message of Islam. It's not a message of violence. It's not a message of terror. It's not a message of hatred, for example. On the contrary, you know, it's a message of absolute equality among, you know, the members of mankind, and doing good to everybody, whether he is Muslim or non-Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ says that we have to say salam, you know, the greeting of Islam, ala man arafta wa man lam ta'rif, that you say salam, that is peace, you know, to everybody, whether you know him or you don't know him. So this includes Muslim and non-Muslim, you know. So this is the real message of Islam. It is a message of peace, of safety, of security, doing good, being benevolent, charitable, and helpful. That is indeed the real message of Islam. It's not a message of violence or a message of hatred or, you know, terror.
I want to know your opinion of the media coverage of Islam and Muslims. Do you feel that the media has been perpetuating a lot of negative stereotypes about Muslims and Islam and not really doing enough to promote understanding of Muslims and Islam?
Yes. In fact, there are two parties. One party is the Muslim dua, those, you know, sheikhs, those imams who call for al-Islam and explain what al-Islam stands for and defend the message of al-Islam. And there is another party who deliberately want to distort, you know, the image of al-Islam, deliberately, because they visualize that if al-Islam, for example, prevailed, it could harm their interests. Therefore, it is in their interest to disfigure the image of al-Islam and to make it look, you know, wicked or look ugly, for example, in the eyes, in the view of other people. And we must, you know, admit that if, for example, 20 or 30% of the American people, you know, become Muslim, this, of course, will target a certain interest in this country, you know, and in other countries like Western Europe, for example. For example, Islam is against bank interest. So bank interest under Islam